This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
Capital One Saver Card. With Saver, you earn unlimited cash back for going out or staying in. That's unlimited 4% cash back on dining, at a restaurant, or on takeout at home. 4% back on entertainment, from the front row of a game or on popular streaming from your couch. And 3% back at grocery stores, where you'll find everything you need to make the meals that make their day. So earn unlimited cash back with the Capital One Saver Card. Capital One. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com for details.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Welcome to Podcast Radio Hour on Radio 4 Extra and BBC Sounds. I'm Laura Grimshaw, and this week I am joined by Izzy Sooty, and the two of us are all loved up as we are listening in to podcasts about love in all its forms. So, Izzy, you're very qualified to talk about love, as you've done the series Izzy Sooty's Love Letters for Radio 4, and you do a podcast called The Things We Do for Love, all about the things we do for love. So you like to talk about love a lot. Why does love have such an appeal for you?
I think I'm just fascinated by relationships. I'm fascinated by the kind of tiny cracks in relationships and how things change and when people meet later in life. And I don't know, I just think it's the gift that keeps on giving.
There are so many different forms of it. I mean, this is a very good link into our menu of podcasts that we've got coming up. But there are so many different aspects to look at.
It's true. And I think people often concentrate on romantic love, don't they? And actually, in my podcast, it really doesn't matter. You can talk about your love of bread.
Yeah.
That's, I think, 80% of Josh Widdicombe's was about bread, and that was great.
But that's incredibly relatable, you know?
Yes, exactly.
Coming up then, we don't mention bread, but we have loads of podcasts about lots of love, be that romantic love, misguided crushes, partnerships, friendships, parental, sibling, familial love, and the love of pets.
Love is a huge tool on getting to understand and communicate better with our animals.
We speak to Karen Rice about love, loss and grief in her podcast Stolen Goodbyes.
I'm going to wear my memories like garlands around my neck.
And we have loved up podcasts from Chris and Rosie Ramsey, Sarah Keyworth and Catherine Bohart, and Idris and Sabrina Elba.
I get nothing back. Nothing.
We begin with a look at friendship. Our first podcast this week is a delightful new series called Love Letter to My Friend. Each week, a new guest writes and reads a letter of love and thanks to one of their closest friends, and then they both appear on the podcast to discuss their friendship. And it's emotional and empowering and funny and sad, and it makes you think about and really treasure like all of the important friendships in your own life. So we're going to chat to the hosts, Lisa Smosarski and Alex Walker. But before that, here is Alex reading her love letter to Lisa from episode 1 of Love Letter to My Friend.
I remember once asking you how you do it all, and you really, really do it all. And your answer was, you just do. And you do. I've watched you come through challenges that would break the strongest of people, and it's in those moments I've felt utter awe for you. Despite the sadness you must have felt at times, you still show up, you still get up, you still wring out the joy in every single moment, whether that's at work or as a mum or as a friend. You told me once about your favourite parenting advice. Find the magic in everyday things. And that's what you do every day. You find the magic and it makes you magic to be around. Whether that's a quick coffee that ends up being the most restorative meeting of my week, or a night out that ends in karaoke and you buying shots for literally everyone in the room. Your energy is relentless, your tolerance for a hangover even more shocking still. Your life really does make me want to go to bed at times, so I do still stand by that robot theory. I remember when we started Stylish, you told me you wanted to create a feminist magazine with complete passion. I really did think you were a bit weird, because at that time there were still lads mags and Page 3 and gossip mags that circled women's boobs. But what you really meant was a magazine that would cheer you on, lift you up, call you out if you were underestimating yourself, and tell you all the amazing things you could do at the weekend. Lisa, you not only created that magazine, you've been that friend to me too. So thank you. Thank you for being my friend. Love, your friend, Al.
I've had a little cry, if I'm honest, and I had a very big laugh. Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Oh my God, I'm completely speechless, I guess. I mean, it's very, very hard to hear someone being so nice to you. It's like really hard. And, you know, people, as you always say, people see your best sides. We're all so self-critical. And you're saying all the things I would love to say of someone else or would say of someone else, but it's hard to hear about yourself.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm getting really emotional.
We're now joined by Lisa Smisarski and Alex Walker from Love Letter to My Friend. So, Alex, can you tell us, how did the podcast come about?
Lisa and I both work for Stylist magazine, and in the lockdown part 1, we wrote a feature where we effectively wrote love letters to one another. Afterwards, we read each other's letter, and we were just blown away by reading all these lovely things about ourselves, the kind of things you would never typically hear. And then, as it happened, when it was published, it got such a lovely response from readers, from our colleagues. So at the time, we just sort of mused on what a lovely format it might be for a podcast. And then, of course, various more lockdowns ensued and homeschooling, etc. So it kind of got put on the back burner until the beginning of this year, when we decided, actually, it really is lovely, and we really do think it would be nice for other people to do it too.
The funny thing is, that whole exercise to begin with was just about writing essays about one another, about our working relationship. And we had no intention of sort of exposing our feelings. We're both quite, you know, emotionally stunted, in fact. That's probably the best summary. So we read one another's letters before we published them. And Alex was like, we appear to have written each other love letters in public. So it was a very kind of organic process. But actually what we realised is you never say these things. You simply don't share how you feel about a friend. So it was very exposing. We felt very seen. And we just wanted to see what that was like when other people got that opportunity to share it. And people were very nervous. I will say that. People felt really, really awkward about sharing their true emotions with their friends.
While I was listening to it, I felt quite emotional, and I was like, when have I really been honest with my friends about how much they mean to me? And sometimes it's when we're drunk, but I never would go into that much detail, because you're in a nightclub shouting into each other's ears, aren't you? Or, you know, you've got that room, haven't you? I was thinking about, I listened to the Tulsi episode, which I just loved, and I found it really moving. She'd been through such a tragedy, losing her whole family in a plane crash, and the letter that she wrote was to her cousin, Carissa, and I just loved the relationship between them, and the fact that Tulsi was able to be so honest about what Carissa meant to her, and I also loved Carissa's reaction.
I know I need to sometimes speak out so that it's easy for you to shine your true light. I particularly love it when you challenge old traditional thoughts and behaviours in your unique way. It makes me feel reassured that you'll always be okay. The bond we share is like no other. I wouldn't be without it, except maybe you could tone down the bossiness. I love you crazy loads. Thank you for being my friend.
Yeah, she cried. And your work here is done.
How are you feeling, Carissa?
Oh, that was so cute.
See, I can do it.
You can.
When you ask people to take part, and you're saying that some people find it difficult, and I can really see why, what do you say to people if they are finding it difficult to write that letter?
We did write a brief. We did write these are the things that you can include in a love letter, because actually sometimes a blank piece of paper, as you know, is the most terrifying thing in the world. And so what we really wanted to do was go, right, here is a structure you can use. I'll be honest, no one used it. Everyone just wrote their kind of true and honest feelings. Once you get over the fear and the barrier that you're about to expose something about yourself, actually those true emotions do come out. And when it's in your voice, that's even better.
I wonder why it is so exposing.
I wonder whether or not it was that we asked people to write a letter to their friend, but we didn't necessarily ask them, their friend to reciprocate. So they were going out on a limb, these people, saying it first, which I guess is scary. But I think also we just don't have the opportunity. So I think to sit down, to tell your friend what they mean to you, you don't necessarily know the words, the natural words to tell somebody that you love them. So I think that's probably why it felt quite as exposing and vulnerable as it did. But everybody really grabbed the opportunity with both hands, and they really allowed themselves to be vulnerable. And I don't think there was one episode where I didn't cry. Which, you know, I'm not, as Lisa said, we're not the most emotional people. So those letters were good to get the tears out.
It's a really positive experience. I mean, I felt our friendship was even stronger after we'd done it. You know, it's just so unbelievably affirming. And actually, I felt grateful for that opportunity, and it's made me write to other friends as well outside of the podcast, just to say, look, I think you're absolutely awesome, and this is, you know, why I'm grateful that you're my friend.
That reassurance is really quite a powerful thing, and it's really lovely to hear that in the episodes. And I think the point you made, Alex, about reciprocation, have you found that anyone has wanted to reply to the letter that they've received via your podcast?
Everyone. We've asked everybody at the end, will you write a letter back? And everybody said yes. It's actually almost as lovely to write the letter as it is to receive it, because you reflect on your own choices. Why did I make friends with this person? Why am I keeping this person in my life? Oh, it's because they're brilliant, and look at all these shared memories that we've had together, and how nice is it to remember that drunken night, or that time when they held my hand when I really needed them, and how nice is it to reflect on all of those things. There was also lockdown when we didn't see all of our friends and when we missed them so much. So this just happened at such a perfect time for that.
You two are so positive as well. I think you really make the podcast. You feel very safe. Like with the Tulsi episode, as you say, Tulsi has been through a really tragic event. You two give her such a positive environment to talk, and that it's just really contagious, your two's energy. And I think in different hands, this could be such a different podcast, but I can really tell how much you guys love making the show.
Oh, well, look, Izzy, that's so nice, because I think what we felt, which we didn't expect to feel, was that how much we're being trusted with other people's stories and with other people's emotions. And Tulsi actually had her own amazing energy and positivity and optimism, and I think we really fed off her during that episode. But I do think it's about trust. You know, you're exposing something very intimate about yourselves, and we felt really privileged. That's one of the beauty of podcasts, isn't it? It's quite an intimate format, so you feel like you've been invited into a conversation. There's something so relatable, so emotional, so raw. It's really visceral, but it's so unbelievably heartwarming. It takes you on this like huge journey of emotions.
I think it was a really nice touch that you started the series with your own letter. So you put yourselves out there first in terms of actually properly sharing your love for each other.
I think we needed to. I think we needed to feel that exposed in order for us to then let other people do it. You know, we knew what it felt like to be exposed and to be really honest. So it was exposing for us, and it did feel weird. And I think we needed to have felt that before we could ask other people to do it. And hopefully that was why we wanted to make it as safe and nice as we possibly could.
The pressure was on because actually we wrapped up what I write back to Alex, which was this huge pressure hanging over me throughout the whole series, because I was thinking, I'm listening to these incredible letters and, you know, we're being taken on these journeys. Alex has said all these wonderful things about me. I was like, I really wish I'd gone first, actually. I think it's the better way around. So although at the time Alex thought she'd got the short straw, I think it backfired on me in the end.
I'm really interested in the format, because it's quite a simple format, really, isn't it? You have the letter read out reasonably early on, and then the response to it and talking about themes that the letter brought up.
The letter is the jewel in the crown. It is the star of the podcast, I think. And we wanted to dissect it afterwards because we wanted to really get to grips with some of the themes. And actually, you know, so often you'll hear a snapshot of someone's life and you've got so many questions. So we were like, we can be the people that ask those questions on the listener's behalf. But the letter is so special. That is the gift that we're talking about. That is the thing we want everyone to go and do and write to their friends. So we felt that had to be really quite pure One of our really powerful episodes was written by Nova Reid, who's an inspirational speaker and author, incredibly eloquent and wonderful woman. But she's written to a friend of hers who passed away 2 years ago, Tanisha. She had so much that she wanted to say to her friend. And as she described it, there was such a colossal hole where her friend once stood. And I thought that was an incredibly powerful episode and actually incredibly affirming in the sense that this is why you need to tell your friends. You know, we don't say these things until it's too late. And although they did get the opportunity to share their love and pride for one another, there were still many unspoken things. It is so incredibly touching. She is so raw and honest, but yet so incredibly positive and uplifting. And she talks about how her friend is still with her, how she channels her into her work and what she carries with her. And I felt I learned a lot from that episode. But we've had, so many wonderful, brilliant guests, such different experiences.
What are your plans for the future then? Are you going to just carry on doing these brilliant episodes?
Oh, there's so many people's stories that we want. I mean, we've got a list as long as our arm in terms of like, here are the people we'd like to hear from. So like cross-generational. We had one man who was written and listened to. We'd like to hear from more men about their relationships as well. I think people who met in very unusual circumstances are fascinating and how they're brought together, or finding a friend in later life. I mean, honestly, we've got so much. This is what we do. Just list off, just shout different types of friendships at each other. It's genuinely beautiful. It's been such a special thing to be part of.
Love Letters to My Friend is in its first series with episodes coming out weekly on a Sunday, and it's a podcast from II Studios that's available on all podcast platforms.
Sticking with friendship, the comedian Lou Sanders has an excellent podcast called Cuddle Club, which I think is best in my accent, actually.
It really is.
Cuddle Club is a podcast all about cuddling and hugs with your nearest and dearest. Each week, Lou is joined by a special guest to discuss hard-hitting issues that all the other non-cuddle-based podcasts shy away from. She's had some really cracking guests, including Catherine Ryan, Richard Osman, Big Zoo, Ross Noble, Jamali Maddox, Mel Gedroy, Sarah Barron and Jeff Lloyd, and Alan Davis, Sarah Pascoe, Tom Allen, Aisling B, some bloke called Ellis James. I don't know who he is. I just know he takes a long time in the bathroom today. And in this clip, Lou talks to the spectacular comedian and actress Lolly Adefope.
Cuddly sort of gal before the pandemic?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, love a cuddle.
Anyone you can get your hands on?
Get your hands on. You know what I also love is linking arms. I think it's quite underrated.
Oh, that's nice, actually.
I love to link arms with someone, especially like, you know, when you're, for example, you're at the pub and then you're moving on to somewhere else afterwards, perhaps someone's house, and you're walking there with a big group. I know you and I have been in situations like that with comedians and things.
Sure.
And you link arms with the person that you're walking with. Lovely.
God, I've just had a flashback. I don't know if I'm imagining it or not. And I do think we've linked arms, probably.
Yeah. And the thing is about linking arms is that it can last quite a long time. Cuddling can as well, but you're stopping the world to cuddle, you know.
Yes, you are. Oh, my God, Lolly.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. Linking arms lasts longer.
Yeah. Especially when you're in a big group. And, you know, a cuddle is very special. You know, sure, you can cuddle everyone and that is nice sometimes. I went through a period of whenever I would leave a party, I would make sure to give everyone a big hug. And then I stopped doing that because it was actually kind of annoying. But, for them. You know, for them, yeah, they told me to stop. They begged me to stop. But if you're, for example, you know, 15 people walking from one place to place, it's easy to get lost in the group. It's easy to feel a lack of connection with the people around you. You know, you can feel lonely in a crowded room. But once you link arms, you've made that connection. It's not too stifling if a person doesn't like close contacts. You can still carry on with your journey, but you've got that little bit of comfort.
I loved listening to this one. So the whole episode is very, very funny, and I think they're really lovely together.
Yeah.
Because I think Lou just makes people feel really comfortable, and she's so funny.
Yeah. And
you kind of have to go into her world, don't you?
Yeah, it's so much fun to listen to, and you can really hear all the guests really enter into the spirit of it.
Yeah, it's really uplifting, I think, and only Lou could make this show. Well, Cuddle Club with Lou Sanders is a plosive production available with open arms wherever you usually get your podcasts.
You're listening to Podcast Radio Hour on Radio 4 Extra and BBC Sounds. I'm Laura Grimshaw and she's Izzy Sooty, and we're talking about podcasts about love in all its forms. So on to romantic love, and as it inevitably becomes, everyday love, which is mainly about putting up with each other. Married couple Chris and Rosie Ramsey have a very popular long-running podcast called Shagged, Married, Annoyed, and from this point onwards I will refer to it as SMA. SMA started in 2019 and there are over 120 episodes available. Each week, Chris and Rosie chat, rant, swear about their week, their kids, their relationships, their work, and their beefs with each other. In this clip, they are at home and on the wine, and Chris has a beef with Rosie about his birthday present.
This is a nice bottle of wine. Chris got sent some expensive bottles of wine from his manager. What was it for? Your birthday?
What was it for? It was for my birthday. That was at the beginning of this month. You know that thing that you got me a fan for? I haven't talked about that. On my birthday morning, I opened up my present. And it was a fan. It was an electric fan.
Honestly, you ungrateful little
guys. It was an electric fan.
How horrible are you? It was to put around your Peloton to cool you down when you're on there.
What part of the Peloton should I put it on?
The handlebar. That's what it wraps around.
Well, then I'll not see the screen.
Oh well.
Thank you. What am I going to put it around the telly at the top?
Oh. Anyway, Chris got these very expensive bottles of wine from his manager.
From someone who loves us. From someone who actually likes us.
I was just surprised because they are very pricey, and I was quite surprised that it was just for a birthday, not like a big celebration.
It was a full box of them. There was like 12 of them in the box.
I know, mate. I know. So anyway, we're doing that thing where we went to open it earlier on, and we googled the price, and my mum was like, no, we can't open it. And then you go, Sandra, they end up owning you.
Yeah.
Remember when you got that bottle of champagne? When we first got together, the same manager got you a really expensive bottle of champagne.
Yeah.
And we didn't open it for years. And I genuinely think when we opened it, it didn't taste as nice as it would have. Because I know you can keep them for a long time, but I think it was just... And now I live by you can't let things own you. If you open a really nice bottle of wine when there's loads of people there and you're like, oh, got this for my birthday, you get like a thumbnail and then you go, well, that was delicious, but I've had to share it on 7 years, so...
Sorry, you get a what?
A thumbnail? Thimble.
Were you trying to say you get a thimble and you said a thumbnail?
Is that not a saying? No.
No, a thumbnail?
SMA with Chris and Rosie Ramsey is produced by Avalon and it's released weekly on Fridays.
Now, the comedians Sarah Keyworth and Catherine Bohart, who were a comedy couple but now aren't, present a fabulous podcast available on BBC Sounds called You'll Do. It's a very funny, very realistic chat with other comedy couples about what really makes relationships work. And their guests have included brilliant comics couples Zoe Lyons and Cindy de Jong, Joel Dommett and Hannah Cooper, Ed Gamble and Charlie Jameson, Nish Kumar and Amy Annette, Paul Sinner and Oliver Levy. And in this clip, married comedians Harriet Kemsley and Bobby Mayer chat to Catherine and Sarah about how they met.
How did you meet?
At a house party.
Yeah, well, I think we've met twice before, but Bobby doesn't remember. But so the house party is the official meeting where both of us remember meeting.
She didn't leave much of an impression. The first 2 times I met her,
rude.
Whatever she was doing, she wasn't really,
you left an impression because...
Exactly. I was putting an effort in.
Yeah, but you weren't really wearing shoes, so it's hard to forget somebody that's not, like, properly wearing shoes. Like, I'm not saying it was a good impression, like, it was an impression.
Listen!
You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to forget.
So... Harriet, can we talk about the 2 times you think you met? I believe that you met.
Yeah.
Shoeless Bobby prior to any acknowledgement from him, and what you thought of him.
Yeah, tell us it from the very actual start.
Because he's a dynamic man of much mystery.
In hindsight, it's a confusing situation how I thought, this is the man I'm going to marry. So we met at gigs, and I think that's what was confusing for you because you came up afterwards and said you liked my set, but apparently that's something you used to say to all the women. So it wasn't something special. And then it was at the party when we properly met, and we both had this moment that, I don't know, I just saw his face, and I walked around the corner and then he just like leant to the side and just smiled, and he just had the loveliest smile in the middle of this party. It's so pathetic, but he was just looked so lovely, and I just remember this moment and I was just like, oh no.
Oh no?
As romantic as Harriet's pretending that evening was, let's not gloss over the fact that she had sex with someone 2 hours after we met at that party.
I went home with somebody else. But in that moment I thought, I had to get it out of the way, you know, because I knew this was going to be a long-term thing.
You'll Do with Catherine Bohart and Sarah Keyworth is a Whistledown production for BBC Radio 4, and all episodes are available on BBC Sounds.
Continuing with the theme of celebrity couple podcasts, Coupledom sees real-life husband and wife team Idris and Sabrina Elba explore the power of partnerships spanning love, business, creativity, politics and more. The celebrity partners have honest conversations about all the complexities of living a shared life and offer wisdom on how to make relationships work. The all-star lineup of guests includes Kris Jenner and Kim Kardashian, Ben and Jerry, yes, the ice cream guys, and in the first episode, the Great British Bake Off winner Nadia Hussain and her husband Abdul discussed their arranged marriage and their happy life together. In this clip, they play the weekly tradition in the Coupledom podcast.
The game's called Who Does What, and the theme tune goes dun, 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 dun. Who does what? Abdel's in.
Listen, I could listen to Idris all day. He's got an amazing voice.
I've got to practice it a little bit more. Basically, the game is we're going to ask you some quick fire questions.
Quick fire?
Yeah. You don't get a chance to deliberate. No arguing. We don't want no fights. Sabrina, you start.
Yeah? All right. Who cleans up?
I do.
Who does the cooking?
I do. Who is the fun parent? Oh, it's him.
Who does the shopping?
I do. Who balances the checkbook?
Me.
Always.
I don't do.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't do numbers.
The kids are big, but who takes the kids to school?
Oh, shared, I would say. Shared.
That's shared.
I do it a lot at the moment because I work at home. So.
That's you, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, who is the keeper of family traditions?
Me,
Ooh,
definitely.
Nadia, yeah.
You know what my nickname is? He calls me Nostalgic Nadia because there might be something that I take it from somewhere or a picture from, I will take it and I'll frame it, or I'll remember a song and I'll have the lyrics written up, or, like silly
It's not everything in this house has, even behind me, if you could see,
it's the other
these
side.
Shelves, that side, yeah. The shelves, clocks, all the birth times of each of our kids. It's really nice, but everything she does has a nostalgic element.
Nostalgic. No,
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
One more question. When you fight, who makes up first?
Abdul.
Me.
Yeah.
Doing it.
Yes, definitely. He wins. Yeah.
He's redeemed himself.
There he is. I didn't ask for it. I'm not a leading question, but when you said you were stubborn, and that question isn't, I made that question up, but I wanted to understand that a little bit. Sabrina and I both have, strong personalities, and typically it's Sabrina who comes and says, hey, listen, man, I don't want to fight, but I've been better at it recently. But what happens is when I do it, I get nothing back. Nothing.
All 6 episodes are available now on Audible. Coupledom with Idris and Sabrina Elba is produced by Awfully Nice and Sable Labs.
You're listening to Podcast Radio Hour on Radio 4 Extra and BBC Sounds. I'm Izzy Sutty and she's Laura Grimshaw, and we're talking podcasts about love in all its forms.
A form of love that's harder to deal with is grief. I kind of get through loss by telling myself that grief being so awful and so painful is actually a good thing because it means that there was love, and the alternative is much worse. We've all been affected by or surrounded by loss and grief during the pandemic. The deaths from COVID of 150,000 people in the UK means 150,000 families have been changed forever, my own family included. The Foreign Affairs journalist and podcaster Karen Rice started her podcast Stolen Goodbyes in October 2020. In each episode, someone who has lost a loved one to COVID talks about the shock and anguish of death without warning or goodbye, how they grieved in isolation, and how they've coped with seeing the widespread suffering, all the while dealing with irreparable changes in their lives. It's truly a podcast specific to this terrible time that allows those affected by death and grief to keep the memory of their loved ones alive and bond with others who have shared their stories. We will speak to Karen shortly, but first, here is a clip of an episode from February 2021, in which Karen's first two guests from the podcast, Emma in Kent and Pamela in New Jersey, discuss their friendship, which was born out of the podcast, where they discuss the deaths of their husbands from COVID. And they talk about how much they miss their husbands, who were both in their mid-40s when they died.
I'm still like, I don't understand how he's never coming home. Even now, it's still, I just don't understand it. And I think that's what I miss. I just miss his presence. I miss him being here. I miss having someone to bounce ideas off of. I miss someone to parent with, you know, the good cop, the bad cop side of parenting. I don't do that. I am both cops now. I miss the fact he used to cook for me, and he's just not here. It's just his presence. He's just not here.
What about you, Pamela?
I feel the same. Like, I miss him being around. Like, you know, when the kids are in bed, having that time where we would just talk or watch TV, or, I mean, it's kind of lonely when you don't have your person with you. And just, yeah, like I miss having some of those like dishes that only he could cook, you know? I'm like,
what kind of thing?
Like he was very good at doing the real complicated type of recipes where I'm just like, I want something quick and like done in like 20 minutes. But he would take his time and make like paella. So like the day I was like, I'm never going to have that again because he's never going to make it for me again. You know, and I miss his little surprises, you know, just like those thoughtful little things that he would do for me. So I kind of miss, but like just knowing that he would have made it special. And like at Christmas, I was like, I wonder what he would have gotten me. So it's just like those little things. Cause he was he just got so excited when it was time to get me a gift, you know?
And I think the thing that I was unprepared for was just, and it sounds silly to say it, but just how different my life was going to be. Like, I knew it, but everything about my life is different. Everything. We're halfway through watching a series, a box set. I can't watch it, you know, so I don't watch the same TV. I don't eat the same food. Everything has changed. My entire world has been uprooted and nothing is the same. That's hard to get your head around.
So you feel like a different person?
Yeah. And in fact, to the point, I don't really know who I am.
Yeah, you're like finding out about yourself. Like I'm still trying to figure out who I am. And I know I'm a very different person. And I feel like some of what Martin used to do is like now I'm like kind of like taking what he did and doing it. Now I feel like sometimes I'm like, after I do something, I'm like, wow, I just pulled a Martin there. So it is like totally, I'm a different person. And it's like hard, I'm learning myself. And I'm like 37 and I thought I knew who I was, but apparently I kind of don't, because now I'm thrown into like this unexpected challenge and now I have to figure out who I am, and I'm 37 and it's a scary thing. I had myself figured out.
We're now joined by Karen Rice, the presenter and producer of Stolen Goodbyes. What prompted you to make this podcast?
When the pandemic broke, it made me think about my own grief, and I remembered the funeral of my Irish grandmother when I was about 20. There was such a huge show of support and unity. And so when the pandemic broke and there was all these awful statistics, I imagined how on earth could you deal with something like that? How could you lose a loved one with no warning, no goodbye, no funeral? And my innate sort of journalistic response to that was to give these people a voice.
When somebody does die, in any circumstance, you want to kind of keep their memory alive by talking about them. And because the pandemic meant that the grieving process and funeral and getting closures from funerals were taken away, I think it's a really nice thing that you give people space to talk.
I can't really say how important that was to them, that the lives of their loved ones, that they could vocalize who that person was and not just how they lost their lives. Hugely important. And also really help them with the grieving process, to talk themselves, but also to hear the stories of other people who also lost loved ones. And, you know, many of the people on the podcast have become friends and have connected because, you know, they are bound by this unique experience, shared experience, but, you know, they've gained comfort from that.
One thing that struck me in Laura is how much it's about your guest. You really give them the room to talk, and you take them through kind of each step of their grief and each step of their memories. Did you sort of make a conscious decision that you would step back and do that?
Yes, well observed. I strongly felt that, and in any interview, that, you know, sort of 85-90% of the interview needs to be, you know, the voice of the person that is being interviewed. And particularly with this sensitive subject matter, because, you know, these people found the strength to tell their story. And if you've listened to the podcast, you'll know that, you know, there was some very emotional moments there. So obviously you need to give people space to feel that emotion, you know, before sort of moving on to the next step in, you know, what happened, the sequence of events.
I was really struck by how eloquently Pamela spoke about her love and about what happened. And I think the fact that you allow people to go into so much detail, the way that people can pass away from COVID is sometimes, I've been quite shocked listening to your podcast that it can happen really suddenly and it can happen in quite surreptitious ways.
At the beginning of the pandemic, you know, everybody was living, this is in the words of Lindsay Simmons, who lost her father, Kevin Morgans, to COVID-19. In February of last year, everybody was living their life as normal. In March, everybody was terrified that they would get this virus. And, you know, in April, May, people, you know, had lost their loved ones. Catastrophic loss is how she described it. And then, you know, to have no warning and, you know, to say goodbye through a window, or in the case of Pamela Addison that you mentioned, she was on a telephone call and the nurse, she was speaking to her husband, Martin, saying effectively a goodbye over the phone. And there was a nurse holding his hand, who then later related that when she had told him, "I love you," that he squeezed the nurse's hand. And it's a grief like no other. I think that people who've lost to COVID-19 will tell you that. And there's an awful lot of unpacking, I think, in that grief, just to get to grips with the manner of a person's departure. As sad as all of that is, I think the podcast also gives a voice to the personalities of the people who are lost. So while there are very emotional, sad moments, there's a lot of laughter in there, and there's people remembering the person, really, their humour, the things they used to do. All of that is really uplifting and really important, because it's a whole package, isn't it?
So many of the experiences I've heard on the podcast were similar to my mum's experience of losing her husband. And it's really helpful because it's a time where we've all kind of felt isolated and alone. It's really helpful to hear that you're not alone. You're not alone in this feeling of very shocking, very sudden bereavement. And I think both the subject itself, because it's very specific to these times, and also the style of the podcast where you give people this room. This is the beauty of podcasting, because you don't really get that anywhere else. It's like, this is what podcasting lends itself to, is actually giving people a voice who wouldn't have one otherwise, and they can tell stories that they wouldn't get to tell otherwise.
I strongly felt that these stories needed to be in the first person, in the spoken voice. I felt that that was the most powerful way to convey their story. And I think that's something that Emma Charlesworth said is very relevant, which is, no matter how great your family or your network of friends, nobody really understands death and grief to COVID-19 unless you've been through it yourself. And so that's why I think the podcast is so important, and also these bereavement groups, COVID-19 bereavement groups that have been set up, where people can connect and, you know, gain comfort. So, you know, the episode 10 Months Without Our Husbands, that's Pamela Addison in the US and Emma Charlesworth in the UK. So despite being on other sides of the world, they heard each other's stories, and there were so many similarities. Their husbands were in their mid-40s, got sick around the same time, the same symptoms. And so it was just this, they had this urge to connect, which they did. And, you know, they are friends, they are a support network for each other. And, you know, they'll meet up. And that's a real positive to come out of something like this.
My best friend lost her mum in the pandemic, and she died with COVID. And I went to the funeral, and the worst thing about it was not being able to hug her, because it was quite near the beginning, and we were all just in this car park afterwards, just all of us crying and having to socially distance. And the feeling that I remember from her is this feeling of overwhelming helplessness. And when people say that COVID doesn't exist, it still makes us so angry, because it's like adding insult to injury. And you've given so many people a voice, and you've connected so many people through your podcast. And I just wondered how it feels for you when do you ever kind of step back and go, wow, I've done this thing? Or do you just kind of plough on and think, right, who's in my next episode?
The podcast is incredibly important to me for the subject matter and for the people who've spoken, absolutely, and for what they've relayed to the wider world. That's hugely important, and it's, you know, been one of my most rewarding sort of journalistic endeavours.
Are you doing more episodes, or how are you carrying on?
For as long as people want to speak about what's happened to them, I think the podcast will go on. However, it would be great if there's anybody out there who would like to tell their story, that they could get in touch with me. The email is stolengoodbyes@gmail.com. If anyone would like to get in touch, please do.
What comes across in listening to the episodes is how important love is in life and how cherished that is. And even when it's, I think, people talking about their loved ones, and you can hear the love and the joy when they're actually celebrating the life as well as mourning the loss. All of it, either sad and happy, comes from that place of love. It's a really lovely, sometimes quite difficult, but a really lovely thing to listen to.
If I could just quote one of the participants, a very erudite, elderly gentleman, Gordon Bonner. He lost his wife of 63 years, Muriel, to COVID-19. But his takeaway from it was, you know, grief is the price you pay for love. And I thought that was so beautiful. And he then went on to say, you know, I'm going to wear my memories like garlands around my neck.
Stolen Goodbyes, which won Best Lockdown Podcast at this year's British Podcast Awards, is available wherever you usually get your podcasts. You're listening to Podcast Radio Hour on Radio 4 Extra and BBC Sounds. I'm Laura Grimshaw and she's Izzy Sooty, and we're talking about podcasts about love in all its forms.
And now it's the love you can't choose, the family. Kathy and Rachel Mason are sisters who have worked together for decades despite their interesting relationship. I Wish I Was an Only Child, another great title. And this title kind of tells you everything you need to know about their relationship. They speak to other siblings in the entertainment industry and beyond about the sibling dynamic to try and work out where the Mason sisters are going wrong. And they've unearthed their fair share of sibling rivalry and sibling outright horribleness. Guests have included Frank Skinner and his brother Keith Collins, Connie Hook and her sister Dr. Rupa Hook MP, Rebecca and Jeremy Front, Rosie and Ollie Jones, Sophie and Channing Duker, and this country's Daisy May and Charlie Cooper. But in this clip, we hear about the frankly adorable relationship between the comedian Ahir Shah and his older sister, Tash.
Between one another, like, I think that the really nice thing that we had and that we still have is that sort of, despite the age gap and obviously despite the fact that, you know, Lily would be at university when I was just starting high school, and then, you know, she would be in World of Work when I was still moving through that, and we'd be at different stages of life, inevitably, given the age difference. It always felt like, from being a child, that we always had this one person who was there, regardless of if we had any issues with our parents or anything that was happening in the wider family or in our personal lives or what have you. There was always this port of call was and is a constant, which I think is very, very valuable. to the extent that before recording this, I was speaking to my manager, who Didi has obviously known for several years as well, and he was saying to me that the one worry I have, knowing the two of you, is that this could actually shape up to be quite a boring podcast. Because it's just going to be like, oh yeah, she's really good. It's like, is anyone interested in that? I don't know.
But that's been the weird thing about doing the podcast, because obviously we sort of want lots of dirt and grubbiness and terrible stories, but the people that do it are the ones that get on with their siblings.
Yeah, but we've unearthed some things. So how would you describe each other?
Terrifyingly capable, needlessly anxious.
Oh my goodness, that's so lovely.
And Tash, how would you describe Ahia?
Oh man, I mean, that's just such a lovely, succinct description, and like gives me lots to think about, and that's sort of just, you know, someone that always makes me think more and more about everything, every single thing. I don't have like a snippy, quick way of describing him. I would just talk for 25 hours about all the things I love about him. He's just somebody who constantly makes me think.
I really loved this podcast.
Yeah,
I thought it was
great.
It was so again, it was just so joyful, and you could really sense how much they loved each other and the shared history between them, couldn't you?
And I think that's kind of true of all the episodes, even when they talk about like periods where they didn't get on, or like difficult teenage years and stuff like that. There is always love in there. You know, Kathy and Rachel Mason do get in a lot of digs about each other, which is really funny. It's, you know, they clearly love each other because they've chosen to spend more time together by making this podcast, but there is that dynamic that's a little bit tetchy.
Yeah, and it adds to the texture of it, and it allows the guests to be honest as well. As you say, you can't choose your family. And it made me kind of thankful that I got given my family, really. I Wish I Was an Only Child is a Little Wonder production, and it's available in all the usual podcasty places, and it's very funny.
Some Families is a podcast dedicated to celebrating LGBTQ+ families, and it won the Bullseye Award for podcasts that represent underserved audiences at this year's British Podcast Awards. It's hosted by Lottie Jeffs and Stu Oakley, who share funny, emotional and true stories from a diverse range of families. And the series explores all routes to queer parenthood, including adoption, donor insemination, surrogacy and co-parenting. In this clip from the episode You, Me and a Lot of Love, Stu and Lottie speak to Leon, a single adoptive dad to a 5-year-old boy.
What bit of advice would you give to other single parent adopters, male or female, out there? And kind of and on that same kind of question, what do you wish you'd known then that you know now?
As I said, I was pretty prepared, so I knew what I was getting myself into. There's been no major shockers. I did underestimate how intense it can be with a single parent, especially when all your family are in the same city. Make sure your support system is super strong. I had all these offers of babysitters. Make sure that your network is super, super, super strong. Think about respite. Think about people who live locally who you can do that. I need to drop him or her off for an hour, 2 hours or 5 hours while I do X, Y, and Z. That needs to be there because it is very, very intense as a single parent, especially during this lockdown period. And it can be very, very challenging if you haven't got that support. But other than that, it's been amazing, just how I imagined it. So some families have just one daddy, which is me, and a beautiful little boy. And I always say in our house, there's you, there's me, and there's lots and lots of love.
I really love this podcast. I think Lottie and Stu are so great and kind and caring and interested in the people that they talk to. They've chosen some really interesting guests with amazing stories, and there's a lot of fun as well in the chats. It's a real joyful celebration of love. There is also a really adorable chat at the start of this episode where Lottie talks about buying a Sylvanian family set for her daughter's friend who also has 2 mums. So she bought the cat family and then she bought another cat family and she swapped out the dad cat for a second mum and gave that 2 mums and a kid set as a present. And then she gave the cat family with 2 dads to Stu. And no family is complete without a pet, in my opinion. That was my cat, Tilde. You may have heard her in the background of previous episodes of Podcast Radio Hour because she doesn't like that I shut the door when I'm recording.
How dare you?
I know. Pet Petcast is a podcast hosted by Emma Barton, who you may know as Honey in EastEnders, who absolutely loves animals, especially her dog Poppy. The podcast is made by the Blue Cross Animal Charity and deals with a wide variety of pet questions and advice. But in one particular episode, Emma is joined by the pop star turned farmer JB Gill and Becky Skirm, animal behaviourist at Blue Cross, to delve into the weird and wonderful ways that pets show affection, solicit love, and let their owners know that they're happy.
What would your top tips be, please, Becky, to communicate more effectively with your pet?
So I don't think as pet owners, you need to be an expert, but there's so much out there now, certainly, on our website about body language, what to look out for. And I think, just knowing the basics can help you understand your pet much better. And sort of learning about them as an individual, what do they enjoy? When you know what to look out for, you can sort of see what might be sort of making them a bit fearful, what they're a bit worried of, and equally what they enjoy, and you can really sort of tap into that. And I think when you know your dog as an individual, it's quite magic to watch an owner and a dog, certainly a dog train, but a cat too, so I think understanding them and having those foundations can really help build that relationship.
Any top tips from you, JB?
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose I've got two big ones.
Oh, go on.
Time.
Yes.
I think time, we all know time heals a lot, and it just as in human relationships, I think time that you can spend with any animal, is only going to improve your relationship with them, only going to improve that bond that you can build. Like we've said, my personal experiences with Phantom and some of our other cats, all of our animals really, with the pigs especially, over time they've just come into their own, and it's like Becky said, I didn't know it's because they're more familiar with their environment, stuff like that, and I'm no expert, that's for sure, but I've clearly seen the changes and how they've developed and how they've come on. And then the other one is love. I think again, love conquers all. So it's again very true for human relationships, for personal relationships, and exactly the same for them. We rescue pretty much all of our chickens from the British Hen Welfare Trust, but when they're there, it's just heartbreaking when you see like they've got no feathers, they literally look like they've been battered and just left, like no care at all. And of course they come onto the farm, we give them straw in their literally love. You give them straw, you give them food, you give them water, give them corn, a bit of a treat, and you just spend a bit of time with them, and you see how much they come. Within a couple of weeks, they're full of feather again, and they're just relaxed. And for me, as I say, love is a huge tool, I believe, in getting to understand and communicate better with our animals.
I don't have any pets. I did have pets when I was growing up. I'm not a big dog or cat person, if the truth be told. I like rabbits, but I like to give them back after an hour, which is how certain people feel about babies. Yes. But I still found this a really lovely podcast. I thought it was so gentle and passionate. Each of the guests had their own reasons for being on there, and they really loved their pets and the animals that they cared for. And I found it just a really relaxing listen.
Yeah, it's just full of love and care and kindness. It's really, really sweet. And across the episode, they talk about different animals and how they show their happiness. And like rabbits binkying is a thing I found out about from listening to it. And it's just so sweet.
And my rabbit used to do that. It's such a good word, isn't it? It's when they kind of lift all their legs off the ground at the same time, isn't it? And kind of leap into the air. And Clover used to do it, and we used to watch her. And we used to know that was an expression of happiness, because it's like they're leaping for joy. Yeah. Actually, now I'm talking about Clover, I think I do want a rabbit, not just for an hour.
Petcast is a Bengo Media production for Blue Cross, and it's available wherever you usually get your podcasts.
You're listening to Podcast Radio Hour on Radio 4 Extra and BBC Sounds. I'm Izzy Sutty and she's Laura Grimshaw, and we're talking podcasts about love in all its forms. And we're going to end where it all begins. First loves and misguided crushes, of which I've had so many. In Love Stories, the author and journalist Dolly Alderton is joined by celebrity guests to talk about their most defining relationships, the passion, heartbreak, longing, familiarity and the fondness that have formed who they are. Guests have included Stanley Tucci, Emma Freud, Sarah Pascoe, Lolly Adefope, Matt Haig, Lily Allen, Ruth Jones, Ruby Tando and Sharon Horgan. Wow. In this clip, Dolly speaks to the author Marion Keyes about teenage loves.
My first love was, I was 15 and we went out with each other for a year and a half. And, oh God, it was ridiculous. It was nothing but door slamming and shouting and misunderstandings, and you were looking at her and no, I wasn't. And it was fabulous. Do you know, it's exactly what you want at that age. High drama.
Yeah.
Like everything heightened. You know, things that happen at that age are just more intense than they'll ever be at any other time in your life, I think. I think an awful lot of people get stuck on their first love. You know, they kind of, even though it breaks up, obviously, because most first loves do, they kind of get stuck and they're waiting to feel those feelings again.
Yeah.
But those feelings are only generated because of the maelstrom of hormones that you are at the time.
Yeah.
And when your hormones calm down, as they do, like when you're 16, 17, 18, 19, you know, you're not going to be able to access that kind of craziness again. It's for the best, really. We can't be going around like that. You know, like nothing would get done.
Yeah, because you do lose your mind when when you're that young,
age.
falling in love.
Yeah.
And also, I think so much of it, you know, that there's a reason that falling in love is called falling, you know. You have to, and when you're 15, you don't know what's going to hit you, so you kind of free fall.
Yes.
And you learn to self-protect and you learn to kind of create these boundaries.
Yes,
because you know how
later.
you could be hurt.
Yes. Yeah. But you're a complete innocent in the first time. And you have no armour whatsoever.
And that can only happen once, I think.
Oh, totally. Totally.
2 series of love stories were made in 2018 and 2019, and all episodes are available on Apple Podcasts. And finally, the fantastic comedy actor Margaret Cabourn-Smith, who you may know from John Finnemore's Souvenir programme and also at some point in All Good Comedy Ever from the last few years. She is starting a new podcast in October. It's called Crushed by Margaret Cabourn-Smith, and it's all about deeply felt and utterly misguided crushes. Here is a clip from her chat with the comedian Lucy Porter.
So Duran Duran was my sort of era, the first wave. And so, yeah, I mean, Simon Le Bon, although I didn't think he was the most attractive member anyway.
No.
But everyone fancied John Taylor, who was the bassist.
I can't picture now, but
who was very pretty. And then there was Nick Rhodes, and
he was fine.
He was great. I mean, you know, he'd do. And then there was Roger Taylor, the drummer, who was sort of all right. And then there was Andy Taylor. And again, like with Jeffrey Holland, I don't want to sort of. Andy Taylor was a guitarist, and nobody fancied Andy Taylor. So I took him on. I was like, all right. It falls to me then, amongst my friendship group, to be the one who puts the picture of... And Smash Hits didn't even do a poster of him.
Well, this was the trouble with being obsessed with Hugh Laurie as well. I mean, I had the same picture over and over again from a Time Out advert because there weren't loads and loads of pictures of Hugh Laurie.
The podcast will arrive in October, and she's got some great guests lined up. Sarah Pascoe, Jessica Foster-Q, Deborah Francis-White, and you.
I should be doing it. We're booking the date in. Yeah. Trying to get her to see Hairspray, the musical, on the same day.
Nice.
So,
But I think my main feeling on it, when I heard about it, I was like, that is such a great idea for a podcast.
Yeah, it is, because love is such a big topic. With crushes, you could do like hours and hours and hours on crushes, because it's normally people's introduction to romantic love, isn't it? What I love about the clip is that they're talking about Hugh Laurie being a crush and sort of saying, why aren't there posters? And it made me think, you know, it would be brilliant if there weren't just posters of pop stars, if there was posters of like Richard Dawkins and, you know... People would have a much wider range.
Yes, yeah. You should be able to get sort of science magazines or like, I don't know, fishing magazines.
You really should.
They should all have like a pin-up in the middle that you can pull out. You can undo the staples, pull out the middle pages and put it on your wall.
So true.
Crushed by Margaret Cabourn-Smith will arrive in October, and Marvellous Margaret will be chatting to me and Scott Bryan all about it in our upcoming What's New for October episode of Podcast Radio Hour. This episode of Podcast Radio Hour was presented and produced by me, Laura Grimshaw, and my co-host was Izzy Sooty. Thank you for falling into love with me this week.
I think that probably, if you look hard enough, there is probably a podcast for every single type of love, and that's brilliant. The thing that I love about all the podcasts we've listened to is that they all celebrate love in unique ways, and some of them are more serious and some of them are more funny and some of them are a bit of both, but I've really enjoyed listening to them all, and I've also learnt loads.
Next week in Podcast Radio Hour, Chris Pearson and I will be looking back at some of the best guests from the year, including Grace Dent, Ken Bruce, Ivana Lynch and Ed Gamble. So join us for that at the same time next week on Radio 4 Extra and BBC Sounds.
Hello, this is Jane Garvey. I'm with my broadcasting friend, Fee Glover. Come in, Fee.
Oh, thank you, darling. Thank you. How are you?
Oh, all right. We do a podcast together called Fortunately. It has been surprisingly successful. And you'd be really quite choked with emotion to discover that other people have found us. Some of them have quite enjoyed it. Other people like carping. We welcome all comers. We don't care who you are, where you are, what you do or what you think, as long as you're prepared to join with us in, well, what do we do, Fee? We kind of unravel, we unburden, we unload. What do we do?
We're a self-help group of two that other people quite like to witness, and we don't really mind if you laugh with us or at us. You're just welcome aboard a slightly rickety midlife ship, which occasionally has guests who are far more successful than us, but we try not to let that get in the way.
We'd love you to join in, and as Fee says, be a part of it.
All you have to do, if you want to subscribe, is pop along to BBC Sounds and search for Fortunately. It could not be more simple than that.